Jussi Kemppainen, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jussi Kemppainen, and I'm here to talk about generative AI in game production. And a little briefly about me first. I'm a VFX artist, 3D modeler, game and video director, and I have over 20 years of experience in the entertainment industry, in mobile, AAA games, and indie games, and movies and TV series, both animated and live action. And originally I started as a 3D modeler, and then I went into video production, and I dabbled with every medium imaginable, with puppets, live action, 2D animation, hand-drawn animation, traditional 3D stuff, and then combination of each. And then I kind of grew into loving this freedom of medium where I'm not in a box, where I can go into any direction I want based on the project, so that I wouldn't need to always be doing the same thing. And I did explore many mediums. I had this animation studio called Studio Combo over 10 years ago, and we were really looking into what we could use to make the different things. But now, my day job is lead VFX artist at Mainframe Industries, where we work on this massively multiplayer online game, sandboxed game. And here's a little trailer of this project.
This is where we belong, exploring this vast and wondrous world. Its treasures call out to be discovered. Its ancient secrets beckon us ever deeper into the unknown. The further we journey from the safety of the light, the greater the rewards and the dangers. This world, it is for us. Here, together, we can build ourselves a home.
Before working on this project, I was a game director in an indie game, a combat strategy game. And in this one, PAXDEI, my role is fairly limited. I only mostly dabble with shaders and particle effects. And I figured I still want to do all the other stuff. I want to do programming, I want to do character stuff, I want to do every aspect of game development. So I started a hobby many years ago, I think 3-4 years ago. I figured I could make an adventure game all by myself, all alone at my home. Don't need any help from anybody. Just work on it, hour a night, 2 hours a week, whatever I can spare on my free time. But I quickly realized that even though I had chosen low poly 3D as the look for the game, because I wanted it to be as easy as possible, my hobby didn't really give me what I want. I wasn't able to work on game mechanics. I wasn't able to work on the storyline. I was only working on asset threadmill. Like, working on this game, I sat down on my computer, spent an hour modeling. That car took me 8 hours. That boat, massive freighter with everything modeled inside, kitchens, engine rooms, sleeping cabins. It took me weeks. And when working on this for 2 hours a week, that's suddenly almost a year. So this hobby just withered and died because I wasn't able to do it. It didn't give me what I needed from it. And then around this time, about half a year after that project ended, I saw the advent of these AI tools, generative AI tools. They were not very good in the beginning, but this was in the early 2002 when these were introduced. I got on the wait list to see what these would be in practical use. I kind of wanted to try them myself. And I think I got Midjourney first. And I tried it. I tried to do some characters. It didn't really do a good job with characters. They were all over the place. There's no one full character here that has everything perfect. It's horrible. But I figured maybe if I take a leg from one of these guys, a hand from one, and a head from one, maybe I can then use these as 2D puppets and do a game with these kind of like weird characters. And just at this point, I also figured my previous game was about this 90s cop show. And maybe it was time to pivot the story to cyberpunk, because the AI just did so weird stuff that if this was set in the future, people would buy it more. Like they would accept that stuff is just odd. There are people with gadgets on their heads and some weird robotic legs. Like I thought that cyberpunk would give me the freedom to combat the weird stuff that AI gives me. Backgrounds were not any better. They were, when you look at the details, it's nothing. But when you look at the big picture, it was beginning to be something. Like I could imagine there's some kind of a nav machine there where you can walk. Maybe if I label something on the bed, suitcase, then that's a suitcase. It's very abstract, but still that could be something where I could make game mechanics in. This project didn't go too far. I just spent time evaluating these tools one by one. Then I got access to DALL-E, which was really good for photography stuff, but not good for illustrative stuff. I wanted to have illustrative style in this game, where it could give me some freedom to do not so top-notch stuff. And then Stable Diffusion was really good, but it took too much time to figure out the prompting and build the kind of the engine, maybe using Comfy UI or Automatic 1111 to get the prompts to do what you want. So I didn't want to spend time prompt engineering. I wanted to spend time making a game. So Midjourney, in the end, I figured was the best overall. Like these are Midjourney version 4 images, and these were the ones where I realized that this would actually work as a game. Like this could easily be a location. It's still hallucinative. There's some stuff in the background doesn't make sense, but that wouldn't matter. It's just background, and it worked surprisingly well. My prompts were very simple. I had this kind of beginning where I think I said like cyberpunk, dirty, and then in the end I think I had HDR masterpiece, adventure game, and then in the middle when I put whatever, a parking garage, a factory floor, and then it would give me an image like this or this that I would then be able to use in the game. And I was thinking of using 2D characters. And Midjourney version 4 already was pretty good at making characters. But instead of doing 2D, I decided to go with 3D characters because it would give me access to motion capture libraries. And at this point, I think it was December, I hadn't still done anything proper. And I was part of this Slack group, this kind of very tightly knit small group with some AI founders, and it was very highly specialized for AI. And they had a message one day where they said that we're going to start kicking people out who don't contribute to this kind of AI research. And then I was, oh, maybe I have to contribute to this research so I don't get booted from this Slack server. It was pretty good. And I figured on my Christmas holiday I'm going to do a playable demo using these backgrounds, making 3D characters out of Midjourney stuff, and just make one short playable burst just to see what would a game look like if it was made with AI. And then I subscribed to Midjourney again after some hiatus. And yeah, there's one slide that shows the more modern Midjourney where it's higher quality, but I didn't want to use this because then I would have to make all the graphics super high fidelity. But this is when I started this game research project and did this one playable demo. And this is the result. It has a character, a background, and the character is set in the background. This took me 12 hours to make. I spent 8 hours on the character, and then 4 hours on the background and the gameplay mechanics and all the programming stuff in Unity. And it was so fast. It kind of blew me away, where I was able to do stuff like this with multiple locations in just a weekend. And I figured, like, maybe it's 2 rooms already. I just spent a couple of weekends, I would really have a game. And this, I think, would have taken me way over a week full time to do without these tools. I've done backgrounds for games for years. I've done characters for games for years. And based on my Excel sheet where I list every task I made in the last 10 years, this would have taken me a week, at least a week, maybe more. With 2 backgrounds, it could have been 2 weeks. But this going down to 12 hours, this seemed like I could reboot my hobby of making an adventure game all by myself, in quotations, because I would be using AI, so that's not working all by yourself. And then I had the blog for the previous project that I was writing. I had already died away, but I still posted this research onto that blog. And I posted that link to that blog on Facebook and went to sleep. And then I woke up in the morning. PC Gamer had wrote an article about this little prototype I had made. It crashed my server. And then on multiple news outlets online, this was on the front page. And I realized that there's a lot of like many people want to know about this stuff. So maybe it would be a good idea to then show them more, because they were really hungry for this stuff. So I figured, instead of making just a game, just to fill my needs of making game design as well as programming and animation systems and everything, I figured I'd start a blog for this project as well. So I bought a domain, echoesofsummer.com, and I built this quick WordPress website where I could then post every week about this project. And I had previously, for the previous game, for the low poly game, I had figured it would be like €8 that I would sell the game once it's done on Steam. I figured this one I would make for free because it's using AI, and I was at that point kind of iffy about it. I didn't know if it's good or bad. So I figured maybe I'll just make this a research project and just release it for free, because I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it just to make a game alone. So here's a teaser trailer for the game I'm building now. This is an anthology series where it has multiple episodes, but those episodes are not connected in any way other than the same universe. So every short episode, maybe 1 hour to 4 hours of gameplay each, tell a different story with different characters and different locations. Some may be shared. And this story is about this world, explorations in a world where AI has taken over every job and every government task, where humans are not allowed to do anything that resembles work. It's illegal for them to do it. So the machines do all the jobs, and the humans have resorted to shifting into criminal activities, where crime syndicates run pastries and massage therapists. And so every business humans would have today is now organized crime. And there's really hardened grandmas knit woolen socks, and ninjas clean up the streets in the night. And then, of course, the robots themselves are then trying to actively prevent it. And in this world, images of stories started to appear into my mind, like what would life be in a setting like this? And then these little stories are what these series, like these little episodes in this game world, are about. And then about the workflow breakdown. So this is the technical part of presentation where I'll go in detail through all the little things that I made to get the game working and to get the graphics looking the way they look. And so also it's exploration into what it cost me, like what did I lose when I was using AI, and what did I gain because I was using AI. And we'll go through the character creation and the background creation, and then about how to marry these two together. And we'll begin with the characters. And as said, I chose 3D characters because they would be, I could be able to use motion capture libraries, use AI-based motion capture, or use Rococo Suite or something similar. And so with 2D characters, I would have had to hand animate all the directions by hand, characters walking forwards, backwards, sideways, and that would have been multiple times more work than with 3D characters. I can just go to Google and search for walk cycle animations, maybe buy them off cheap from Unity Asset Store or download them off somewhere else or mix some more stuff or whatever. And this is a little bit of a time lapse of the whole character creation process that I had for this game. I'll go through all these steps. So this is kind of just like a fast scratch of the surface of all the steps. And as said, this character took me about 8 hours to make initially. I think I spent 2 more hours on it to do the sculpt and all the fine detail afterwards, because I kept polishing the character as the project advanced. Originally, I had thought that these characters would be quite small in the background, so they wouldn't come close to the camera, they wouldn't need to be such high fidelity. But as the project went along, I realized that some of the locations Midjourney gave me, the characters actually came quite close to the camera. And at that time, we didn't have any zoom out tools, so I then decided I need to do higher fidelity version of the characters to have it so that they can be closer to the camera and look better. And that took some doing, but I think it was worth it. And the thing I learned about this is that while AI helped me with the design of the character and helped me with the textures for sure, because I just projected the AI-generated images on the mesh, what I lost was a great deal of control over the character. Like, it's so random what AI gives me for the character. I would do prompts of like hundreds of different character variations, and it would never give me the same or similar. And I would then have to choose from this list of characters, like which is the one that I like the most, and then go with that. So then I wasn't, but then what I gained from it was that modeling the character itself, not having to focus on the design, it came very easy and automatic. It wasn't like it was more like building with Legos, like a fun pastime. I could watch some TV and do the character modeling on the side because I didn't need to think about the proportions or anything about the character itself. So the first thing that I do, of course, is go to Midjourney for prompting the character. And there's my prompt. It's not as simple as the backgrounds. I had to write more. I have an animation background. I have an animation studio background. I was the founder of Rovio Animation Studio. And so from that background, I kind of figured, like, AI couldn't do the same character from multiple angles. When I asked for one character from the front, I did another prompt for the character from the side and a third from the back. It would always be the different character. It would kind of match the description, but it wouldn't have the same clothes or the same hairdo or the same color of skin or the same proportions, same facial hair. Nothing was the same. But then I was thinking, like, in these animation studios, we have these what we call the model sheets and the turnaround sheets, which are these instructions for how to draw characters in your animation, how to have them on model, they say, so that when the animation is drawn, you have something to reference the frames to, so you can see if it's the same character. So I asked Midjourney to generate these turnaround model sheets for me. And that worked. I realized that when I asked for it to generate multiple versions of the same character in one image, it would be the same character. It would have the same clothing, the same hairstyle, same everything. And then I could use these as reference for 3D modeling the character. I wanted a front view, a side view, and a back view because I wanted to project the texture onto the character without having to draw the materials myself. And I wanted to go with a painterly style because it would allow me to do the models a little bit more crappy. The animation could be crappier. Like if everything was super highly realistic, like if the texture and the character design is super realistic, everything has to be. Animations have to be, lip sync has to be, all the eye movement has to be, the shaders, the reflections, everything has to be at the same quality or it falls apart. So I went with a bit lower quality to kind of give me that freedom of making it a bit more sloppy all the way through. And then this is a bit of an example for different style of characters that I could create when this was using this. I would use the general outline of the prompt, but just change the character description, like old female or robot or utility robot or service robot or whatever, and it would give me these turnarounds, and it was pretty consistent. The style was pretty much the same throughout, and I knew that with some bit of overpaint I could then match these characters to the environment so that all the characters would exist in the same universe. And then the first step, of course, is taking these angles and then putting them in the 3D modeling software. And from this point on, the process is the same as if this was using no AI. Like from this point on, the character creation process is just work that everybody does already today. So I began with modeling the character from these images, and then I moved on to UV unwrapping. UV unwrapping, if you don't know, is where you take the 3D mesh and you fold it open, and then you can project a 2D texture on it. You can paint it, or you can use photographs or whatever to make. But I wanted this to look clean to me, so that if I open this in Photoshop, I wanted to be able to know which AI image to use for which part, because I had these 3 views from this character. And so for that, I then took this character and I changed the mesh so that it matched perfectly all of these different angles, and then I used projection mapping to project that image so that it unwraps on the UV coordinate, which led me to this. So I had now 3 images that look like this kind of like unwrapped version of the character, with all the 3 AI generated images opened up. And then in Photoshop, I would just go in and by hand paint in the right surface from the AI generated image so that all the angles looked as good as possible. And then I also went in by hand and redid some of the, I had to paint the eyes myself, the face was so small. And then I did some upscaling in Photoshop, and then I also used Photoshop Generative Fill to fix the most glaring issues, like where there was something was just missing or broken, I could just use Generative Fill to fill in those blanks. And here's the modeled character without the hand-edited texture. So this is pure Midjourney texture on top of the character. And then for rigging, I have previously rigged all my characters myself. So this is where you can then use animations of the character to add bones to it. But I used this tool called Adobe Mixamo for the first time, and it worked quite well. It saved me so much time to use this. After I had done this, I just had to go to Blender to fix some of the skinning, but it was quite nice. And then, as I said, the characters, I was originally envisioning them to be further away in the back, but then as the game project grew, I saw that they were creeping closer and closer to the camera. So I had to do a sculpt pass. So what I did, I took the mesh and I subdivided it a bunch, and then I painted details on it based on the Midjourney generation. So if there was a crease in the Midjourney cloth, I would then add a crease on the mesh, and I would do all these details so that the light would interact with the Midjourney generated textures perfectly. It looks horrible close up in grayscale, but in game it's just fine. And here's the final character in a game location. This is what the characters look like in the game at the moment. And then moving on to the backgrounds. These would be the one where I have most gains. Like making game backgrounds is so tedious, and it's a big process. One background can take anything from 3 to 6 to 7 to 8 days. Even if it's just a 2D background like this. If you make it high enough quality, it's well over a week for one. If you start from scratch, where you have to model everything yourself. And with AI, I could just use the AI images as is, almost as is. Just type a location, have Midjourney spit it out for me, and then go from there. There's a time lapse of these background generations. And one location room now takes with Midjourney, even with editing, it takes under 1 hour, which is just amazing. Which means that in this game project, I can have as many locations as I want. There's no limit to how many places I can put in. I can have all the back alleys, all the cupboards, closets, everything can have a location in it. I can have some just locations that you just walk through if I want to, that have no gameplay mechanics. That would be kind of unheard of in a normal game where it would just be wasting money to make a location where you can't interact with the environment. And this is kind of the thing that I thought that the AI was the most useful in a way that I think if I think about game budgets and how AI would affect a game studio, is like you don't ever go to design a game with the idea in mind that this game will be made with like this game will be 70 hours and it will be like this, and then you begin to get money for that scope of a game. You go to the VCs or whoever and you try to raise enough money to make that massive game. My experience is that you kind of have a vague idea of the scope of the game you want to make, and then you raise money as much as you can, and then you fill up that budget. So the game scales up to match that budget. So you always use all the money, and you make the game the size that was able to do with that budget. So what I think is with AI, what it will actually do is it will make it possible to use the same budget, and the budget is always man hours. It's always just pay for like salaries. But like the office rentals, the computer rentals, the software, that's peanuts compared to how much it costs to have just employees. So if the budget stays the same, like let's say your budget is 10 million, and you make a game with 10 million that is the size of a 10 million game. But then your next game, you have the same 10 million, but now you have AI help you make the game. Your game might be as large as a 50 or 70 million game, because the scope of the game scales up. The budget stays the same. So I think what with AI is going to happen, that we will see much bigger projects from the team of 10 people, and way bigger projects from the team of 100 people. And then if there's a team of like 500 people, I don't even dare to imagine what that project will be once it gets to be unlimited in scope. It's going to be like really fun to see what these like future AAA games are going to be. So here we go with the backgrounds. So prompting is very simple with this one. There's the one, it's cyberpunk, dirty. And then in the end I have wide angle HDR masterpiece adventure game. So that's the kind of the borders for the prompt, and then in the middle I just type in whatever location I want. I try to keep it as simple as possible. And with these backgrounds, what I really quickly realized is that the same prompt can make wildly different versions of the location. Like if I had an idea where I wanted to have something in the room, let's say a TV, I maybe wouldn't get a TV in the room. I wanted to have a TV and 2 doors on the sides leading away. I didn't want the character to be able to, like when you exit this location, I wanted there to be 2 exits on the left and the right, and I had to have these exits visible in the image, and AI wouldn't do it for me. It was so difficult to get all these features in the image, so I had to compromise a lot. I had to, maybe I couldn't get a room with a TV and 2 doors, so I just had to try to see what would be possible. And while I was prompting, in my head I would have to rewrite the story to fit these locations that the AI gave me. And then I choose the best one, and then I had to figure out a new puzzle mechanics or new kind of story points that would match this location. So using AI as background, I was not in charge. I wasn't able to make the story what I wanted it to be, but as this was a research project into what AI does for game development, this was a perfect example. It kind of steered the development and the story into directions that I originally hadn't maybe wanted or thought about taking the story into. So this location I had to edit. I did these edits in Photoshop with the generative fill. I was able to add this door to the side, and then I zoomed out a little bit and changed the background just a tiny bit, so little tiny touches. And I did the same for the location. This location would be a combination of 2 Midjourney generations. where I have one, and then when I walk to the door, I would have a camera move to go to the other. And then to get the 3D camera location, there is this tool called FSpy. It's used in the film industry to reverse engineer camera 3D location in a frame, where if you want to add like a robot to a scene, you would have to know how high the camera is, what's the vanishing point. So FSpy is a tool that helps you do just that. And this data I can then load up in Blender, and then it's very easy for me to model the location in Blender, just a simple mesh. What I needed this for was to have the shadows fall correctly on the ground and have the character go behind objects and in front of objects. So this was simple, like the simpler the better. And then I had to do some specific separate textures, like for this location, the fridge door opens, so I generated insides of fridge in Photoshop, and then I mapped them on the inside of the fridge. And here's the other location in 3D as well. And these are then combined in Unity. So as I had these, as these two images were in different perspectives completely, but because I used FSpy to get the camera data, in 3D space, these now align up perfectly. Of course, they only look proper from this one specific camera angle, but if I did a lerp from one camera to the next, I would be able to have the camera movement, and then when the camera stops, it's perfectly aligned with the projected texture from AI. So here's an example of how this looks like in game when it's moving from one generated image to another. So it's going between these two images from this perfectly aligned angle. And if I stop this in the middle, you could actually see all the stretching and all the duplication of stuff, but when it's just moving, you can't really tell. And I wanted to use this little bit of 3D trickery to make it seem that the game is more advanced than it's on the surface it would be. Kind of have this something modern on this old genre of 2D, 2.5D point-and-click games. And I could have as many of these mid-journey images in this one scene that I wanted. There was no upper limit. And then I had these 3D characters in the background, so it was time to merge them together. And here's a little clip of what it takes, all the different layers, all the different steps that I need to do in order to get these into Unity. And this also kind of shows the little features that I added for these backgrounds, like reflections and real-time shadows that match with the paintings. So the first step is the lighting. That's a simple one. There's a character, no lights. It doesn't match. It looks like a sticker on top of a 2D flat background. It doesn't step into the image. And if I did 3D shadows, it would be just a multiply process on the image. This is the industry standard, the benchmark. This is how these 2.5D point-and-click games have been done for decades, where you have 3D characters, you have 2D backgrounds, they don't match at all, and then the shadows are just these flat shapes on top of the 2D image, and it looks fake. What I wanted to have painted shadows on the characters where they actually match the style of the painted background perfectly. And when they overlap shadows in the drawing, it wouldn't be a double shadow like this where it just gets darker, everything it touches gets darker. I wanted to be able to maintain the base level of just shadow and this ambient diffuse light, and then just have this direct light cut out. So what I ended up doing was a shader that takes the shadow from the character from the 3D and uses it as a mask to blend in two versions of the background image. One that is the original painting and one that is just my handmade version of it. And then ambient light, I had to make the black levels match. And then for the shadow painting versions, this is a version of the background with the direct light and the ambient shadow. And there's another version where you have the direct light and the shadow. And this shaded version of the image would only be visible in the real-time 3D shadows, so it didn't need to be too perfect. Those were really quick to paint in Photoshop with just the darken brush and like a couple of layers there to add some details in the shadow. And for each location, I had to do this shadow pass and then a couple of additional passes that I'll go through. And here's another version where we have the shadow and the direct light. And what this makes is that when there's a shadow in the painting and there's a shadow that's a 3D shadow that overlaps it, all the shadows blend perfectly together, and you'll never have this place where you have a mishmash of painted and 3D shadows. And here's an example of image-based ambient lighting that I made, where you can see on the sphere and on the character, I used spherical harmonics to calculate lighting from the image, actually, so that this is now lit by the just the pixels in the painting that the AI made. This looked really good, but it was so slow to produce, so I ended up not using this technique. But this is really good for locations like this, where it is one bright spot. This has no real-time lights. It has just spherical harmonics, which is actually the technique behind the new hip thing, Gaussian splats. And then this is kind of my process for adding lights in the scene. As you can see in this scene, there's this really harsh light on the door, and then there's the shadow areas. And of course, there is no 3D light in the scene. So then I go in and I place these 3D lights that I try to match so that they would motivate the lighting in the painting. The painting itself doesn't really get affected by these 3D lights at all. The only thing that's happening is that I get the shadow mask for the shadow, but these are lighting the characters and all the real-time 3D elements or fog particles in the scene. And then for the shadow mask, this is a version of the background where I'm using the background to cast shadows on itself, and then I have just for the shadow version of the painting, I just have white. So now I can use this to position the sunlight so that it matches the painted shadows, and now when the character walks in the scene, its shadows align with the painting shadows. And then I had now shadows, but there was one more thing that I needed to tackle, which was these reflections. These paintings have reflective surfaces, and just having the character cast shadow would still mean that he's a vampire. He's not shown in any mirrors or anywhere, so that wouldn't do. So I painted a version of the backgrounds without any of this reflected light as well. And then I made a mask in Photoshop that would show that these areas are reflective. And then I made another mask that shows the white areas are sharp and the black areas are blurry reflections. And then I added a planar reflection on the background. So now the floor is actually reflecting the 3D version of the background painting and all the 3D elements that are in this environment as well. And this was really nice. It made it feel like this is an actual 3D location, and the character feels really grounded in the scene. And in this one, you can also see there is the real-time shadows, and then there's the real-time reflections as well. And then I also made a setup where I can relight the scene, like add actual painted-in light on the scene. I made these holographic screens so I can add life to the backgrounds, have these advertisements, they are all over in Cyberpunk. I made this screen space grass effect that makes it appear that the painting grass comes to life and moves with the wind. And then I added a depth of field effect just to see how it works, and it works beautifully. Of course, not this scale is unrealistic. And then I made a shader that actually uses texture rotation to animate these neon signs, so I can have these lights flicker on and off all the time. And then I implemented Zebra effects, AI-based fluid simulations in the project, and it also supports fire, and it also supports water. And the fire is really nice. The water it works, but it's not as high fidelity. But these are AI-based tools as well. And so I think after I added the explosion stuff, I just want to have explosions everywhere in the game. Every puzzle ends up with an explosion. And I will not go through these in more detail than this today. And actually, we are now at the questions bit. And just talking about what's happening with this project now is every week I'll do an update on the project blog on some topic, sometimes AI, sometimes just game development in general. And then I will utilize and study new AI tools as they come. I have already put in AI voiceovers in the game and these little details that I haven't yet talked about in the presentation. This presentation is couple of months old, so there's so many things that I have added to the game that I haven't talked about here. And then at some point there will be the release. And that will be a fun one because I don't know if Steam allows this game to exist, so that's going to be a fun research to see if I get banned. And if you want to follow the project, you can go to echoesofsomewhere.com to do just that.
Thank you, Jussi. That's amazing, very insightful. A big hand to Jussi's presentation. There's actually quite a lot of questions in the chat, but I would like to start with a question of mine. And while I do that, if you have a question here on the floor, just raise your hand and stand up so that we can get you a mic. So you said a little bit that with a certain budget now we could go like much bigger productions. But do you have any kind of thoughts on what kind of ideas would then be now possible, the ones that have been kind of argued in the productions that we can't do that because of the resources? Is there something that you're looking forward to in that?
I think it's going to be one thing that is going to affect is just the scope of content. Like there's just going to be much more locations, much more unique content that previously people reused stuff, but it's now we can just make it unique. I believe that in AAA, when you play any AAA game, you always find these little notes in the world. Like when you talk about these 100+ million games, every place is full of just letters and little documents, and you can go to a computer and read a conversation of somebody. And I think that's going to be in the future like the norm, where every game is just going to be full of text, like everywhere, just pages of books, and you can just go in and read about the lore of the world because it's free to generate.
Okay. So any questions in the floor? Just raise your hand. Here is one. Please stand up and wait for the mic.
Yes, thank you, and hi.
Hey.
Yeah, I would like to ask the hot question. What do you think about the copyright issues and the whole ethical discussion about generative AI?
Yeah, I purposefully didn't cover this topic, only at the end. I don't know. I'm quite torn about it. I don't really know what's the answer. I'm a little bit afraid that all of these tools are just legal and can be used as is. But I don't know. Like I don't know the legal details. And if this in this project, I didn't purposefully want to explore the ethics or the copyright side of it, because that's a problem that will get solved. It's a solvable issue. Like the AI companies will be able to make tools that adhere to all the laws if the current tools don't. So there will be a point in time, in year or 2 or 3, where these tools are just widely used. And as a 3D artist myself, I wanted to be able to see what would it feel like to live in that world? What would it mean in practice? And I think that the conversation, of course, it's an important conversation to have, but I don't like to be tangled in the conversation of the copyright, because somebody out there is solving that issue, and it will get solved. And there will be a time when these tools are ethical and free to use.
Another question from the audience?
Thanks for the inspiring talk. I'm actually not in the game field, but this is one of the coolest applications of generative AI that I've seen. I'm curious, like, where do you think, like, it seems like the generative AI field is moving extremely fast. What are the things that you're kind of looking forward that you know is already being developed? And on the other hand, like, what are the very game-specific things you feel like the generative AI is falling short from?
I think it at the moment is falling short with 3D generation. That's the thing that I would like to have. Like for this sake of this project, the bottleneck is still the character creation. As said, it took me 8 hours to make that dude, and I made this female character. And at 8 hours mark, I wasn't finished yet. So I was kind of then I saw how long would it take, and it took me 12 hours. So that's already quite a long time to work on one thing in this project where I would like to keep the pace super fast. So I would be very happy if there was a 3D tool that would make like a first iteration of these characters for me from my turnaround images. And then one thing that it's falling short at the moment, like everybody is expecting these AI agents to appear in games where you can talk to NPCs and they will answer you back in actual like conversations that are not scripted. And that looks amazing, but it's so expensive. Like running a game where you have hundreds of NPCs that you can talk to, and if you had, let's say it's a hit game and there's 500,000 players daily and they play the game and it's going to run you bankrupt real quick, just to run those servers to be able to generate all that speech data. So I think that's something where AI is falling short at the moment, that it's just, even though it's making everything so cheap, the things that it enables can end up being very expensive. And that's one thing that it might make it unfeasible to use AI for games in runtime if it's just too expensive.
There's one question coming in, no? Okay, let's get the mic here, so please stand up.
Thank you for your impressive talk. I was asking your background knowledge about 3D and this technical stuff. How much was it helpful for you to using these AI generators, and how does it make you more faster to understand how to work with them?
I think it all just comes down to, with these AI tools, I think my role was more of a curator, where I just took all this crap in and I had to pick up the few pieces that were nice. And I think what it just, this experience just gave me is a keen eye on looking at what might work and what might be a good starting point for it. I think it's just like knowledge of which images to choose to work from. And with characters, it's the thing that enabled me to do this. Like if I had no art background and I would just have AI and I'm gonna make a game, I wouldn't be able to make a game. Like in this project, the first like 15 minutes of talk were about AI and the rest is just me doing the thing that I've always done. Modeling, making 2D images, and so it's most of the work that I have to do for this is just manual labor still.
Also emphasize on that, like compared to character creation without generative AI. So you said that you made the first character with 8 hours. Like
Yeah.
how long would it have taken for you to make that character without the generative AI?
I think 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
Like it's just the most time would have then been spent on just with paper drawing the design.
Yeah.
But if I would have been just like, wouldn't have cared about the design, it would have taken maybe 5 hours more.
Yeah.
So that the savings are not that good with the characters, apart from being able to get a selection of thousands of characters instantly, instead of having to use a concept artist or do the concept art myself for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
So that's where the savings come in. It's in the pre-production of the character design. But once we go into creating the character, it doesn't save that much time at the moment.
So there's a lot of like overpainting and those kind of things that you explained. So obviously that wouldn't be in the like starting from the scratch kind of a character creation.
No.
Did you clock it? How much time did you have to kind of use for cleaning up the images?
I think it's about an hour, maybe.
So not that much.
Not
then.
that much,
Yeah.
no. But we also have to know what to do.
Yeah. Do you think that part will kind of really soon get resolved so that the images are better quality?
I think so. There's already AI tools that do texture generation. I think we have all the building blocks, but we just miss the tools to utilize them perfectly. Like there are AI tools that do this and AI tools that do this and this and this, but they don't really talk to each other yet. So I think that it's possible to make these tools, but with AI, it's very simple to make an image generator where you take text prompt and make it 2D. But then when you want to build a software around it, where you have a user interface, where you can direct it more directly, I feel that the generative AI tools are now in the era of DOS. Like you remember using a computer with DOS. If you had the DOS computer in front of you where you had to put in CD, whatever C, it would be horrible. And that's where we are with generative AI. We are using it like a DOS system. But 20 years on, or 30 years on from that, we are now with these user interfaces that you can use on your phone with your hand, and 3-year-old can use it. So I'm thinking like, that's still ahead in the AI space. In the AI space, we are still haven't seen the actual AI tools that have actual user interface that's intuitive and easy to use.
What do you think, like, will there be in the future, you were talking about the copyright issues, that are solvable problems. Do you think that the tools will be something that we have in-house artists to provide some kind of materials to train the AI to work better with the style that you pick. Because like I've been using some Midjourney, hours of my time, and the images are pretty recognizable in a way.
Yes, they are.
So I guess the companies would still need to work on their own original style.
I think so. And I think that's where you begin to enter the space where you can actually copyright the stuff that the AI generates, where it's based on your IP, your characters, your designs, your color maps, once you can do that. AI is, I think what the true power of AI is that it can do the repetitive tasks for you. Like if you do the creative process and you do the beginning, and then it can just take that work forward forever.
Is there more questions from the floor? So I have one question from the chat. So I guess there was more questions also, but I want to add this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think companies would prefer to match their budget to the productivity rather than the other way around. What do you think about that?
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't. You can't conjure up money magically to match your dreams. Like if companies were able to scale the budget to the dreams that they make, every game would be a AAA 200 million game. Why would you make a 5 million game if you could make money from air? Just I have this project I'm going to make and it's $1 billion.
Yeah.
If there was no limitations for how much money you can gather, there would be endless amounts of it. Like every time you start up a project, you just like with startups especially, you try to just bootstrap money together and then you make what you can with that money. It's not realistic to be able to make a game where you just first write the script in your basement and you do all the design and you're like, mwah, and then you calculate how much it's going to cost. That's 17,000 millions. And you go in and ask for somebody like, I want 17,000 millions. What happens is somebody goes and I'll give you 2, and you're like, whoop, and then you have to make a new plan that matches 2 million.
Yeah.
That's the way it works in real companies.
Yeah. So the budget would be maybe matched to the revenue that can be gotten from the games then.
You just hope that you get more. You can't match it. There might be companies that can, like, I don't know. I can't think of any gaming company that would have a design first and budget later. Maybe like Supercell or something where they just don't have any concept of a budget. It's just work on something forever.
I'm pretty sure that they have some budgets.
Yeah, but they can then extend it. Like it's not like a hard stop. And I can't, like, I don't know other industries, like if there is some other industry that's where this works, but in creative industry it doesn't. You always have the money first, or the money is going to be the box where you work in. That's going to be the scope of your product, is how much money you have to make it.
Yeah.
Like that's the foundation, is the money. Of course you can raise it along the way to kind of, when you get like more ideas, you can then raise the money along the way. But then again, and then also you just get some money and then you have to make do.
Okay, so this topic is just completely complex and in the move, changing all the time. The pace has been incredible for the past 2 years. So thank you, Jussi, for your insights and for your research project, which we've been waiting for to see how the tools could impact the production. We're going to have the next speakers coming in, so thank you, Jussi.